Hi, I'm good. How are you?
You're like a grown person. You're
I
like
still remember your class.
yeah?
Yes. Oh, I remember like my 7-page long reading response. Oh my god.
So how old are you now?
I'm 16.
That is crazy. And what grade are you in?
11.
11th grade. That is amazing. So I'm so glad that you were willing to do this. I really appreciate it. So the focus of the YouTube channel is real talk and just basically giving kids an opportunity, particularly ones that I taught, an opportunity to talk about things that they wish they could have learned more about that they didn't get to. Not necessarily just with me, but in school in general. So I know that you've done your research, but based on what you shared with me, which I'm really excited to discuss. So, what's the topic you're going to be sharing with our audience?
I will be talking about finances in the education system and just learning more about that.
Or what sparked this for you? Like when we emailed back and forth, what made you think, okay, this is the topic I'm going to choose?
So, really, I was trying to think about it, and I was thinking about like what my friends talk about most. And like some of my friends have jobs now. Like they had to go through the whole process to like get their work forms from their school, and like learn to manage their finances. And then I have like this one friend who like spends every paycheck, and like her parents started being like, "Oh my God, like why are you spending every paycheck?" And I realized like we never really learn like how to budget our money, or like we're not prepared to like budget our money in such a way that we'd be able to like provide for ourselves. And I feel like the same thing goes when we like go into the workforce, and then we have to learn how to do all of this like while we're doing it. Like there's no like real preparation for it that we've gotten so far. And I just feel like so many people would benefit from it, like just knowing and seeing like the lack of financial literacy that's like currently present among like the friends I know, and like people that like I've just like talked to in passing.
Absolutely. Even with people of my in my own peer group, that's still something that we're learning. And it's definitely something I think that's becoming more and more common and coming to the surface more, I guess, because it's unavoidable. It's hard to ignore the lack of literacy. And then because obviously we can see our national state. And so I think that when we see how it trickles down, we're like, oh yeah, this is definitely something an area that it's a red flag that
Mhm.
we should be addressing. I 100% agree with you. So I know there's a lot of kind of subtopics under the umbrella of finance. So I know that you had divided it up with like taxes, credit, saving, investing. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from here and I'll jump in
Okay.
whenever I need to.
So as I was like doing my research, I kind of saw that like a lot of people don't know like how to budget, how to file taxes, and like none of this is really taught in the education system. And like 86% of teens were even saying that they wish that it had been taught.
Mm,
So as I started thinking about it, like I thought of things that we could break that down into. Like if this was to become an actual part of the curriculum, like what would be taught? Like what would like students want to learn? And
mhm,
one thing I saw was that tax forms were a big thing. Like even in
mm.
families that are earning less than $55,000 a year, which is like barely a livable wage, I'd say, like especially living in New Jersey where
Oh
costs
yeah.
are so high. Um, like a lot of them were going to other people to have their tax forms filled out. And that's just like another expense on top of everything else. And I also started to see that it wasn't that difficult for people who like learned how to do it. Like it's
Mm.
easier to file taxes yourself, and there's a lot of different softwares available to help you out with it, and things that even the IRS provides. And I started to realize that like if we taught like tax forms in school, and like it was described like what to fill out in each section, like students could easily learn that. And if students kept note of that, like students who didn't choose to go into college afterwards and just went into the workforce would already have like what they needed to just live and manage their funds
To
well.
not break the law.
Exactly. um, and the other thing was like saving. Like
Mm,
I noticed that a lot of families, like if they had an expense larger than $400 even, which I'd say would be maybe like a month's savings for a family. Like they wouldn't even have that much saved up in case of an emergency. And like that just shows how so many people are living paycheck to paycheck because they really like don't think about the long run. Like around 60% of people like don't even have retirement funds saved up, and that's even among people who are retiring in 10 to 15 years. And just because of like that huge gap of people who like don't realize how much they need to save until like they're in their 70s and they still have to work because they don't have enough saved up to retire. And it's just like such a huge issue about like people not being able to put that money aside. And I feel like when you're taught, when like you actually see, okay, a family is getting $400 a month, you have to buy food, you have to pay rent, you have to get this, this, and this, you have to buy clothes. And like seeing how that all can get budgeted out, like really teaches you something about like what to do in your own life. And when you have no like ability to like apply that knowledge or like even practice it, like there's a real like problem. And a lot of people like have to go start working and then start doing all this, and then they realize that like they're not doing it right. And rather than like doing it on the go, like having to learn as you're doing it, having preparation for that can just be so helpful.
The question I have where you're at so far with what you've discussed is you mentioned about how, people not necessarily knowing, how to budget or how to save by the time they get into their 70s, for example. Do you think it's that they don't know, or that because of the cost of living, because of the expenses, because of inflation, because of COVID, because of all these factors, that they just unfortunately are unable to save?
I think that it's a little bit of both. Like everything that you just mentioned makes it so much harder to like balance everything and budget it. But when you have preparation for that, it certainly helps to like make sure that like, you can figure it out. Like having the preparation makes it easier to overcome all of these circumstances that we're in right now. And like I feel like that's what makes it really overwhelming for
Mm.
families that have student debt, home debt, and are like in all kinds of like credit
Their
card
own businesses or
debt.
whatever it may be. So, how do we address that in schools? Because, of course, you've already mentioned, like, teaching them, for example, maybe how to fill out your tax forms, what different tax forms even mean. Why do they even have to fill out tax forms? Which I'm sure the basic knowledge and understanding is taught probably in some economics courses or even finance courses in the schools that do provide those courses, because not every high school even necessarily provides all of these courses as an option. But in this society that we're in, it's all about like abundance. We're in the world of Amazon, where at a click you can have 12 things at your house by like 3 p.m. Like that's the world we're in now. And it's hard when, well, I want my child to have the most latest iPad and iPhone. And, how do we teach having that self control? Because budgeting, in a way, is being able to have self control in a world that is very consumer based.
That's so true. I'd say that a lot of it comes from like seeing the long-term benefits of like what saving can do. Like seeing those like big ticket items like houses and cars, and like presenting those as like goals to students and showing how saving this much every month for this period of time can get you something like that. And like having students understand that it takes a level of like waiting for that big outcome to occur. Like it's the same thing with like any type of diploma. Say you go to high school, you have to wait those 4 years for that reward you get as a high school diploma, and that's
Mm.
something you can use later on in life. Like it really comes from like seeing the long term, seeing the end goal, and like I think that's what gives a lot of motivation to people to save, to like put that money away because you're waiting for something that you can get or that you wanted to have for a really long time. Um, I also wanted to mention something else you talked about was that like a lot of schools don't offer any type of financial education. Like in
Mm.
our school district, in Bridgewater at least, like which is a relatively like affluent town, like most people are well off here. I'd say like a lot of other places are not like us. And I feel like
Right.
that gives me like a different perspective on things because it tells
Yeah.
me like I'm in like that small percentage that does have all of these things offered. Like
Right.
the high school here like has financial literacy classes, and like only 15% of high schools actually do offer classes like that. So
Wow.
really like thinking about it like in that sense and seeing that like we see things a certain way because we think it's available to us, and like so many other people just don't have anything. Um, and like that just like we have in New Jersey at least, art is like a graduation requirement. Like you have to take some type of artistic class, like
Mhm,
drama, whether it's like pottery, crafts, no matter what it is, you have to.
mhm.
And just like implementing financial literacy classes in every high school can have like such a humongous benefit. And it's something that we don't really think about because like people don't stop to like see like how many people just don't know anything about taxes. Like we think that, oh, we'll just go to like a tax specialist to get our taxes done. It's not more of like a, oh, I can do it myself because ever since I was in high school, I've like progressively been getting more and more knowledge about like how to do things. And we can start that like in middle schools and elementary schools, as you said, by like talking about budgeting, talking
Mhm.
about saving, talking about the importance of that, and like slowly mentioning it over time, like reinforces students' minds that, oh, this is something I need to do.
Do you think that there's some part of society, government that doesn't want us to be financially literate?
Especially as I was looking into like the investing portion
Mm,
of this whole topic, that really became clear to me. Like the reason why like investing isn't really taught in schools is because like people who are really good at investing don't want to become teachers. Like they want to do other things with their life. And it's kind of a means of like the 1% sort of like showing its influence on us. Like
mm,
if everyone knew how to invest, if you invested right now, let's say like 50 or so years later, like you could have over 1,000% return on whatever you invested. Um, and like if everyone knew how to do that and what to invest in and how to invest and when to take it out, um, people wouldn't like people would be able to rise out of poverty easier. People would be able to manage their finances better. And it's really like difficult to then come out of that like state of like being so financially insecure and like having to live paycheck to paycheck without like knowing how to invest or even like having the money left over at the end of the month to invest. Um, and so it really makes it like difficult for like people to become richer or like gain money.
who do you think then is benefited or put at a disadvantage by, let's say, everyone becoming financially literate? Let's say we are able to educate the population at large and they are getting more and more intelligent about the choices they're making, the investments they're making, and they're able to pull themselves out of poverty level. And overall, we see this increase. Do you feel like there is a downside to that, or do you think that, like, why do you think there would be people that are subconsciously or consciously avoiding that?
So 70% of like the revenue available is concentrated against the top 1% of
Mm-hmm.
society.
Mm-hmm.
And people really don't want that. People in the 1% don't want that money to be redistributed. They don't want everyone to be equal. Like even raising like wages, even raising the minimum wage causes such a controversy. Like people really don't want people who are below them to gain the same opportunities because it would mean that they wouldn't have as much, like they wouldn't have as much of an advantage. Like being a billionaire and all of the billionaires together like want to keep the money among themselves because otherwise like maybe they'd be brought a peg down to millionaires and that wouldn't be enough for them. So like keeping the money concentrated there is definitely something that benefits them and it's something that harms people like in the lower middle class.
But I've also found like there's so many billionaires and millionaires that are so philanthropic and they're so, charitable, and they align themselves with causes and charities that give away millions and millions of dollars. So I've always thought it was curious that, there's that side, but then there's also this side. To steer back to the question I asked before as well was, so how do we get this into the like schools? What is step one, do you think? What do you think the first exposure to kids should be?
So I think like teachers as a whole just need to like be more aware of the fact that students need to learn financial literacy. Like occasionally bringing like savings or budgeting projects into classrooms, like starting in elementary school. Like when like teachers have more control over like what they can teach before they go into high school, where there's like more of a set curriculum for each class. Like introducing that, maybe doing a project a year, like bringing it into um circulation among like students' minds and like what they're thinking about like is the first step, and then like going to like the governmental level, like appealing to our congressmen, telling them about like the necessity of having financial education like every school, and like having like a statewide push for
Mm,
better financial education.
mm.
Maybe like creating a policy that every high schooler must take a financial literacy class like before being able to graduate. Like that would be a huge step in like making sure that students really like know what they need to do in order to like succeed in like in their finances and like in their budgeting, and even in like investing if that was something that was explored in the class.
Because we do actually have a stock market club here at our school, that two of our teachers run. And it's fantastic because that teaches kids about the concept of investing and looking at the stock market and looking at which stocks are going up, they're going down. Why might that be? What are the trends? So I think that's also a great sign that that's something that they're doing. As far as you mentioned the taxes, you mentioned investing, you mentioned budgeting. What do you think the priority should be?
So I think we definitely need to mention investing, but I'd say mention it in a way that's like if you put in $100 right now when you're say 18, then when you're 50 maybe you'll have 1,000. Like
Mm.
mentioning like the big amount of profit that you can make through it is essential, but I think that like it's going to be very difficult honestly to get people who really know how to invest and are really good at it to become teachers, and I feel like that's sort of an unrealistic goal to put forth right now. So just like understanding the magnitude is like a huge step. I'd say saving is very very important. So many Americans are not prepared for like big sort of like expensive like issues or accidents, like whether they're medical or because of their vehicle. Learning how to save for things like that and how for like big ticket things like houses and cars is so important, and learning how to budget and manage your money in a way that even if like you're not making that much and you're really struggling, you still have the ability to meet your basic necessities. Making sure students have knowledge of that, and finally, going over tax forms, going over like the different types, going over how to fill them
Mm.
out, learning like the different softwares available to you for free, to help you out with it. Those are all essential.
Are there any tips and tricks that you have? I mean, are you working? I don't know if you're working.
So I was working over the summer. I was earning $12 an hour, working like the entire week, and like it was really like tiring. And it's like I feel like when you work, you really learn the value of money. And like when you think about it, like whenever I would buy something at like the store, I would think this is like 5 hours of work. Should I really buy this? And
Yes.
it gives you like it makes you
Yes.
think about it more.
Yes.
And I think that like working is like a really good experience for like any high schooler because
Mm.
like it really teaches you a lot and it like matures you in a way that you're like more like financially aware. And I just think like being aware of saving, like that's something I'm more aware of now, and I feel like it makes me like think about things I do more and like really have like that second step of like waiting before I actually do something.
I think it's analogous to exercise. Like sometimes if you want to eat the cookie or the potato chip, you're like, oh, this is like 2 hours on the treadmill. Is this worth the cookie? And usually my answer is yes. But but I totally understand what you're saying. So I also think it's a matter of actually having curriculum then to implement. Because listen,
Mhm.
teachers love educating. We love educating. We have no problem with, you know, difficult topics and things like that. But it's also a matter of materials and resources being available because Not only does that then require me to educate myself and make sure that I'm solid on the knowledge that I'm going to be imparting on these students, particularly in an area that is of such importance and significance and has very long term consequences, then I also need what materials are going to be the most effective, what materials are going to be clear and concise for all the diverse types of learners that we have. So I do think this is something that you're bringing up that's so important and something to bring attention to for supervisors, politicians, whoever it may be. I'm curious if this is something that exists maybe in other schools and we're just not exposed to it, or maybe it's something that comes in math classes. I'm wondering if it shows up there. Have you seen any of this in your math classes?
So we've like briefly gone over it. Like I think we go over it in compound interest, but it's not really like this is a formula you'll need for
Mm,
investing, or this is something you can put in a bank, or this
mm,
is the kind of savings account that you should put this money in
yeah.
to get this amount of return.
I see what you're saying. There's like theoretical application, but there's no actual opportunity for the real world application of it. You mentioned 86% of teens said that they would have liked more financial literacy exposure, right?
Yeah.
And you seem to be referencing a lot of statistics. Was there a source or sources where you're getting this from?
Yeah, so the 86% of teens was from a 2011 study by Charles Schwab. And then some of
Okay.
these specific statistics were from like Gallup polls or like other studies.
You didn't really talk about credit. So, like credit
So
cards?
yeah, so, like, credit meaning, um, like, a lot of people, like, are in credit card debt that's, like, over $1,000, and a lot of people don't understand that, like, just paying the minimum credit card debt, which most people aren't even able to do, like, isn't enough, and that you really do need to pay off that entire credit amount that you've spent that much for your credit score to, like, be good, and people don't even understand what a credit score is or, like,
Yep.
why it's necessary to have a good credit score, and when it comes to taking out a loan for a car or a house and their credit score really hurts them, like it's suddenly like this big surprise that I should
Mm.
have been doing this all along. And people really don't realize that until they're in that situation. And like the whole point of like financial literacy education is just to make sure that you're not learning this when you're in that situation.
Which has been the case for so many people, unfortunately. Now, you
Mhm.
mentioned paying the minimum balance on your credit card. Do you want to explain for the audience why that is?
Okay, so
What
when you
happens? So let's say you have $1,000 balance, and the minimum payment due, let's say, is $15, and let's say you pay the $15, but not the rest. What happens?
So there's interest that's gained on the rest of that money, and usually the interest rates on credit cards are like obnoxiously high, and really like that amount that you didn't pay will increase. And by the time you're at your next month and you're making that minimum payment again, say it was $15, and your original amount that you spent was $100. So that $15 you paid, there's $85 left. By the next time you're paying that $15, it's going to take out $15 and you're going to have $100 left. So you're really just adding on, and eventually you'll get to a point where there's like this immense amount of money that you have to pay that you didn't actually spend on the credit card, but that actually just kept on accumulating because you only paid the minimum
So you're going to write the curriculum for us,
amount.
and we're going to teach exactly what Miss Modi has created for us. I did touch on this before. I don't remember if we fully talked about it, but how do we also teach the the idea of not buying into consumerism and not listen, I love the iPads and the iPhones and the Amazon everything just like everybody else. We all do, right? But how do we teach ourselves self-control or to, be okay with not having the most, recent or most up-to-date applications of whatever it may be? Because I do think that there's some psychology and emotional well-being that's tied to our finances too, like the reason that maybe we shop so much or the reason that we're spending so much. I think that psychologically mental health is all tied into this as well.
I agree, and I think part of it's like, "Oh, I see her with an iPad, why can't I have one?"
Yes.
And I think it's definitely, like, letting ourselves, like, giving ourselves one thing and saying, I'm not going to get this thing because in the long term, this is what I'm going to have. Like seeing the big picture is super important. But also like giving yourself those opportunities to be like, this is something I can spend on. This is something I'm going to put in my budget that is an iPad or something I don't really need, but something that I want. And
Mm.
giving yourself like saying that this is something I want and this is something I'm going to get. But this is something I'm going to give up because I'm going for this long term thing. So, like, keeping that balance between like things you're letting yourself have and things you're letting go of for the long run is like really important.
I do think that probably feels really good. I
Hmm.
think it probably feels good when you're not in the moment, maybe when you're having to show restraint, but ultimately when you're able to get the ultimate thing that you want, I feel like that probably feels like, okay, this was worth it, you know?
Definitely. Like when you walk into that new house that you saved
Mm.
up for all that time that you put that down payment down on, and like now you have that space to yourself, like that gratifying feeling from that, I think, is like what also motivates people to continue saving because you know the feeling. And it's so positive from like getting something like that.
So true. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that was it.
I would love for us to work together towards looking more into the national requirements, if there is such a thing,
Mhm.
for financial literacy. And if not, who we can write to start that process, because I do think that's really important. And also potentially looking into the the curriculum that may already possibly exist for financial literacy, particularly at my level. I don't believe that that's something I've ever come across, but what a cool project for me. I don't know how much. I
No,
don't know. I don't know how much you want to invest in it,
no.
but I think it's such a cool project. This is a different kind of investment that would also have long term benefits. So we'll definitely be in touch if that's okay with you.
Of course. I'm so
Okay.
excited.
I know. I think it'd be such a cool project. Tell your sisters I said hello. Thank you so much, Gia. I really appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.